Today, we're cutting straight to the very heart of the American road. We're focusing on a figure that has always occupied this, unique, romanticized space in our national imagination.
The trucker.
Exactly. The independent roaming trucker. This is the last American cowboy, the one who answers to no one, crossing the continent on his own schedule.
It really is the ultimate American myth of frontier independence, but the sources we've gathered, they show this myth colliding, and I mean violently, with 21st century reality.
A violent collision.
Yeah, we're looking at an intense friction point where this dream of liberty is just being crushed by relentless surveillance technology,
Yeah.
overwhelming corporate control, and the chaotic inefficiencies baked right into our modern supply chain.
Okay, so let's unpack this because the scale of this is, well, it's immense. This workforce is absolutely essential.
Completely.
We're talking about 3.5 million truckers who shoulder this colossal task of moving, 72.2% of the total tonnage of goods shipped within the U.S.
The economy just stops without them. It's that simple.
So our mission today is to really understand the forces reshaping their lives. We're talking about the surveillance state inside the cab, the high attrition rate that cripples the industry,
And the economic pressures that are actively eroding this unique, identity-driven way of life. We're basically charting the demise of the cowboy.
And to really get at the depth of this, we have to start not with the tech or the economics, but with the human and emotional cost.
Exactly. And the sources take us right into the emotional core of this community by beginning our exploration at a place you might, least expect to find any solace from all this pressure.
A permanent sanctuary parked right in the middle of a massive truck stop.
That's it.
And that sanctuary is J. Lorette's Chapel. It's a repurposed 18-wheeler parked permanently at the Petro Travel Center off I-39 in northern Illinois. It's this bright, if maybe unlikely, light offering grace to these weary modern cowboys.
It's such a brilliant symbolic setting, isn't it? The American supply chain, in all its brutal efficiency and crushing volume, it all runs through this colossal truck stop.
Where fuel is pumped and routes are planned.
And right in the middle of it all, this old trailer is offering spiritual guidance to a demographic that is just increasingly desperate and emotionally threadbare.
So the figure leading this ministry, J. Lorette, he sounds instantly captivating. He's 64 years old, relatively slight at 5'5", but he's dressed head to toe like a proper cowboy.
Button-down shirt, vest, boots, straw hat, the whole 9 yards.
And the sources say when he preaches the word, he transforms from this mild Midwesterner into what they call a human incandescence.
His style is not subtle at all, and it's perfect for his audience, who often arrive carrying, deep trauma and a lot of pent-up road rage.
Right.
His voice crescendos to the point where it's cracking. He's uppercutting the air, stamping and clapping. He's not really talking theology. He's talking about wrestling. You hear him shouting things like, "The devil's learned to use us and abuse us to beat the snot out of us." Then he uses this incredible visual, miming a janitorial sweep. "The devil mopped the floor with me, but God had compassion on you and I." It's so visceral, so confrontational.
And the physical staging of the chapel itself, it reflects this deep, almost desperate blend of the sacred and the road life.
It does. Inside, it's pretty simple, wood-paneled walls,
Oh, yeah.
framed Bible verses.
But the outside is pure Americana and faith. One side of the trailer reads, "Transport for Christ," with a neon cross gleaming in the dark. And right next to the scripture, John 3.1 scene, you see this striking image of two godly hands cradling a truck.
Cowboy Pentecostalism. That's what the sources call it. It's where the gospel meets the asphalt.
And this sanctuary, it attracts precisely the demographics you would expect to see struggling under the weight of this industry.
Yeah, the drivers who come straight off the road, they're mostly men, overwhelmingly over 50. And their bodies, they really tell the story of the work.
Yeah.
They show the slow entropy wrought by bad food and decades of sitting.
It's a physically exhausting life, even if you are sedentary, just because of the constant strain and, the poor conditions.
For sure. But despite that visible weariness, the camaraderie inside is really intense.
There's this beautiful moment described where a straggler enters the chapel and several men immediately call out, "Rip!"
And he's welcomed with high fives and hugs. It's this spontaneous, supportive community built right in the shadow of the interstate.
And they temper the seriousness with humor, which is so characteristic of a group that has to deal with these high-stress situations.
Oh, yeah, the fantastic anecdote about the driver named Chuck. He's got this, ZZ Top-style beard, and he's struggling to find the right passage in the Bible.
Right.
Lorette keeps repeating the Gospel of Luke, and Chuck Genuinely confused, responds, "Oh, I thought you said Motley Crue."
It's
And they
amazing.
become, as the source says, irrepressibly funny like this, suddenly schoolboys.
Yeah.
They're using humor as a defense mechanism against that constant pressure.
The sources also describe this emotional and even physical relief that the services provide.
Mhm.
In one instance, a small, older man named John asks Lorette to pray against a sharp pain in his shoulder. Lorette anoints him with frankincense, and the other drivers, they'd immediately rise.
They surround him, placing hands on him or kneeling until he awakens, smiling serenely. This shows a level of intimate physical support that's just desperately missing from their isolated lives on the road.
So Lorette is clearly operating as far more than just a pastor. He's the holy therapist for a population defined by psychological exhaustion.
And he believes the core word defining the trucking industry today is lonely.
And that loneliness is just compounded by guilt. These drivers are gone for weeks, sometimes months at a time.
Right. They carry this massive emotional burden over missing birthdays, date nights, soccer games.
Their constant absence is the price of their profession,
Right.
and the financial necessity of that isolation just feeds the guilt.
Exactly. The physical work they do, hauling freight across the country, it becomes this brute metaphor for the emotional freight they carry. This deep emotional isolation and pressure creates enormous psychological volatility.
Which is why his ministry is so necessary.
Absolutely. What's fascinating is how his personal history connects directly to this. I mean, his path wasn't a straight one. As a young man, he was a self-described wayward punk.
Involved in theft, street fighting, even assaulted police, which eventually landed him in prison for theft.
Yeah, and he had this dramatic, life-changing conversion while in his cell. He felt delivered from the devilry that had twisted his early life and became convinced that his calling was to be a prison chaplain.
And he realized that the life of a trucker today mirrors that incarceration.
He explicitly views the chapel as the prison chaplaincy he was called to do, ministering to people who feel they're living a life of deranging captivity and surveillance.
The source material details instances of extreme emotional outbursts that are common at the chapel. It really demonstrates just how close to the edge so many of these drivers are operating.
There's one anecdote that is just extraordinary and really underscores the emotional stakes.
The man who showed up wanting to kill him.
Yes, an enormous man just full of hatred for Lorette, hating his voice, his looks, everything, showed up at 4 a.m., pounding on the door saying, "Get up, preacher, you're going to meet your maker."
Terrifying.
And this man seemed genuinely ready to commit violence. The crisis was only averted when another driver, a very large ex-bouncer, intervened.
And the three of them ended up just talking about Jesus until sunup.
They did, and the intruder finally broke down, agreeing to be born again. Lorette explains that this level of intense rage isn't rare. It's usually just a desperate cry for love and forgiveness that's buried deep beneath all the stress.
It truly paints a picture of an essential industry workforce that is psychologically fractured and seeking spiritual refuge because the job itself has become a mental and emotional cage.
And that sense of captivity and surveillance is so critical. It moves us from the emotional sanctuary to the physical cab itself.
Right.
Because the profound impact of technology is that it has completely replaced the legendary liberty of the trucker. The open road used to signify absolute freedom. Now it signifies relentless, inescapable monitoring.
This is where it gets really interesting. That freedom began its true structural erosion with the mandatory implementation of electronic logs, or e-logs.
This came from federal legislation passed back in 2012, all designed to improve safety.
So these are basically tablet-shaped devices mounted on the dashboard that track everything.
Everything. Driving time, fueling, rest breaks, even idling. The federal hours of service law is absolute. Drivers get a maximum 14-hour workday, and within that, they can drive no more than 11 hours.
And crucially, they have to take a mandatory 30-minute break within the first 8 hours of driving.
Yes, and this is where the real-world impact of the e-log becomes so intrusive. The driver loses all flexibility. Once that 14-hour clock starts, it cannot be stopped for waiting time.
So if you arrive at a warehouse and you spend 4 hours idling while they load or unload your trailer, those 4 hours still count against your available 14 working hours.
Exactly, and that drastically reduces your ability to drive and therefore earn money.
That's the key technical frustration, isn't it?
It is. If a driver takes their mandated 30-minute break, let's say they pull over to the side of the road or rest stop, the e-log strictly enforces it. If they move the truck even 10 feet to adjust their parking or grab a better spot.
The E-log registers driving time.
And that movement illegally cuts their required rest period short. Violating this risks being yanked from the road, fined thousands of dollars, and damaging the carrier's safety rating.
Now, the drivers do concede that these rules arose from past reckless behavior, and I think that's a crucial point to acknowledge.
Oh, for sure, as one driver admitted. Back in the day, they used to do lines of coke off the freaking dashboard. That's how they could get from one coast to the next overnight, which was, obviously incredibly dangerous.
So the rationale for the E-log is safety, but the drivers deeply resent the intrusion because they've lost the ability to make professional judgments.
That's it. They are professional drivers operating these massive machines, yet they can't decide for themselves when they're fatigued, when they need to stop, or when they can safely push on for another 20 minutes to reach a better truck stop.
Their professional discretion has just been replaced by an inflexible clock.
And this digital intrusion is only getting more and more comprehensive. Newer trucks are equipped with advanced computerization that the sources perfectly term AI helicopter parenting.
A state-of-the-art Peterbilt can have at least 10 computers governing everything from steering to braking.
And this technology is marketed as increasing safety and fuel efficiency. But the psychological effect is just profound demotivation.
Right.
These vehicles are doing so much of the decision-making, governing speed, maintaining distance, stabilizing steering, that it reduces many drivers to what the industry bitterly calls zombified steering wheel holders.
So the professional satisfaction of mastering the road is diminished when the truck is constantly second-guessing you.
Constantly. Furthermore, these systems are not passive. They're constantly reporting back to dispatchers about any aberrant events, an abrupt stop, harsh braking, a missed turn.
So imagine driving for 10 hours knowing that every fraction of a second is being logged and analyzed for any sign of deficiency.
It even goes further. If a driver changes lanes suddenly or swerves to avoid a hazard, the truck's internal computer may actively defy them by jerking itself back into the original lane path.
Wow.
And while a driver can usually override this, the fact that the machine is fighting the human operator suggests a complete structural lack of faith in the human element behind the wheel.
It emphasizes that the corporation trusts the code more than the expertise of the individual.
And that structural distrust is maybe most visible in the feature that generates the most intense backlash: driver-facing cameras.
These are often affixed to the windshield, trained directly on the driver's face, and perhaps most invasively, some drivers report that cameras are pointed back into the sleeper cab.
The sleeper cab, where they're supposed to be resting and maintaining some shred of privacy.
For the company, the justification is straightforward and, pragmatic liability protection.
Sure. In case of an accident, they want video proof that the driver wasn't distracted, drowsy, or otherwise acting irresponsibly.
But for the truckers who value autonomy above all else, it's the ultimate violation of their private sanctuary. They feel oppressively monitored right where they yearn for liberty.
And the resistance to this is palpable and often expressed with some really dark humor. The sources cite the thriving Reddit community R-Truckers, where the humor is raw and immediate.
Right, the piss jug enthusiasts post.
Yes. One popular post began with the title, "Hello, fellow piss jug enthusiasts," and it detailed how their employer was implementing driver-facing cameras.
And the response was a mass exodus, demonstrating the intensity of the resistance.
Hundreds of users commented that they quit their jobs for this precise reason alone. The outrage is summarized perfectly by one comment that demanded immediate reciprocity.
Which was?
"I'll only accept a driver-facing camera if the company owner gives me a 247 unrestricted stream into his house."
And that is an incredibly powerful point. It cuts right to the heart of this unequal power dynamic.
It really does.
They're responsible for the safe and timely delivery of 72% of the nation's goods, yet they're treated like children who can't be trusted to operate a vehicle without constant digital supervision.
All while the corporate heads enjoy complete anonymity and freedom. The lack of respect, that's the true psychological strain.
And this constant monitoring and loss of self-determination, it just fuels the central economic crisis of the industry.
Yeah, the industry is defined by high turnover.
Yeah.
We have to ask the fundamental question: why does a staggering 90% of new hires quit within the first year?
The immediate unified answer from the drivers themselves is brutally blunt.
No money.
Exactly, no money. But this isn't just a simple low-wage problem. It's a systemic failure rooted in the very structure of the industry, which the sources call a predatory apprenticeship system.
And this system is Pretty complex. While you have thousands of small fleet owners, the industry is structurally dominated by about 24 mega carriers.
And these mega carriers act as the true gatekeepers.
Right, because they run the schools where roughly 400,000 new truckers get their commercial driver's licenses, their CDLs, annually.
They lure new drivers in with these seductive promises of financial plenty, often showing a glossy upper-end salary potential.
But what the new hires actually sign is a training contract, and the terms are simple and highly restrictive.
The driver has to commit to driving for that specific company at significantly below market wages for a fixed period, usually a year.
And if the driver quits or is fired before that year is up, they get hit with an exorbitant high-interest fee for the training they received.
This fee can range from $5,000 to $10,000 or even more, often with high interest rates attached.
The implication is undeniable. This is a form of debt peonage. Drivers stick around, enduring terrible conditions and pay, simply because the specter of massive high-interest debt is hanging over them.
Forcing them to work for effectively the cost of their license.
That's it. Let's look at the wage reality this creates. A slyly charismatic driver named Junius Silas explains the situation clearly in the sources.
He says the average pay per mile for a fresh driver is only 26 cents.
Right, that's the base rate, which is already incredibly low for the immense responsibility they carry.
But then there's the mechanism that halves that already low wage.
The split seat. Companies commonly pair new drivers together. They take turns at the wheel and split the earnings for the entire trip,
So if the truck runs 500 miles, they each get paid for only 250 miles.
which effectively reduces their per-mile pay to 13 cents, even though they spent the entire 14-hour workday confined in that cab.
The math is devastating when you're trying to support a family. Another driver pointed out, it don't make child support. It don't make electric bill.
And the historical context here just shows how far the bottom has dropped out of this profession.
This is staggering. When adjusted for inflation, the average U.S. trucker salary in 1980 was a robust $110,000.
And today, the median salary is less than half that, hovering around $48,310.
That wage decline represents a profound societal shift. Trucking used to be a reliable entry point into the middle class.
Yeah, a way for a high school graduate to own a home and support a family comfortably. Now it traps people in debt while demanding immense hours and physical sacrifice. This historical context is why the rage is so deep.
And drivers directly blame the 1980 Motor Carrier Act for this decline.
Deregulation. It made it easier for people to get a commercial driver's license, which flooded the market with cheap labor and drove down wages.
As one driver put it, the worst thing they ever did was deregulate it. What I made when I started, I make less now.
That's a 40-year reversal of fortune. And the systemic exploitation goes even deeper than just deregulation. We need to talk about a piece of legislation from 1938.
The Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA.
Right. This act established the right to a minimum wage and overtime pay for most U.S. workers, requiring time and a half for anything over 40 hours a week.
But the FLSA contained a specific exemption, the motor carrier exemption, which bars truckers from overtime pay.
And that exemption was arguably designed for a different era. But today, it means that despite frequently working 70-plus hours a week, when you factor in all the required rest and unpaid waiting time, they only get paid for the miles they drive.
So a huge portion of their professional time is effectively unpaid.
That's critical. They are mandated by federal law to take certain breaks and to wait, but the law simultaneously ensures they are not paid for those hours.
There is currently a bill making its way through Congress, the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act.
But until that passes, that archaic loophole means the industry can continue to exploit the maximum amount of labor for the minimum amount of compensation.
And to make matters even worse, there's evidence of outright corporate malice.
The sources detail a $2.1 million preliminary antitrust settlement against 9 megacarriers for colluding not to hire drivers who broke their training contracts.
So this suggests a concerted effort to suppress wage competition and actively punish exploited drivers who try to seek better work.
They're trapping drivers in debt and then preventing them from escaping that debt. It's a closed system.
And this systemic trap brings us to the core of the political debate, the alleged shortage.
The shortage. The corporate narrative, heavily pushed by organizations like the American Trucking Associations, the ATA, claims the shortage is real.
They point to an aging workforce, difficulty recruiting women, and ballooning freight volumes as evidence.
The ATA also argues that churn and poaching, Drivers jumping jobs for those lucrative 5 Fusk signing bonuses simply inflates the turnover rates, making the problem look worse than it is.
But wait, let's look at the counter-argument here. Aren't those signing bonuses simply a necessary market correction if the base pay is truly debt-inducing?
That's a great question.
Aren't the corporations admitting the entry-level pay is unsustainable if they have to offer huge bonuses just to retain someone for 6 months?
That raises a crucial point, and the driver's argument is diametrically opposed to the corporate narrative. They call the shortage propaganda and corporate welfare.
Todd Spencer from the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, OID, he notes that there are nearly 3 CDL holders for every job that requires one.
The talent pool exists. The willingness to work for the pay doesn't.
So the drivers argue that companies use this shortage narrative specifically to angle for federal and state grant money taxpayer dollars to subsidize the cost of training new drivers.
They are essentially monetizing the churn, funding the constant turnover that keeps wages low and the apprenticeship system profitable. It is, as you said, corporate welfare disguised as a labor crisis.
The sources draw this fascinating analogy to academia.
Yeah, that a great share of grubby, underpaid, high-stress work is done by an insecure entry-level class, the student drivers, striving desperately to join a small, secure class.
Which, in trucking, is the highly experienced owner-operators, or, if we continue the analogy, the tenured professors.
Exactly. The system relies on exploiting the hopeful.
And we absolutely cannot overlook the ethical breakdown that results from this high attrition debt peonage model. The source details the case involving CRST.
A really disturbing case. The company faced a multi-million-dollar class action settlement for deceptive practices surrounding free training. But the human cost is far more horrifying.
Between 2018 and 2019 alone, CRST saw 150 to 200 sexual harassment claims filed by student drivers against their trainers.
Just think about that number. These are new drivers, often women, trapped in a sleeper cab with a complete stranger who holds their career hostage, knowing they can't quit without incurring massive debt.
The sources detail an utterly appalling settlement received by one woman who alleged her trainer raped her.
But when she reported it, the company allegedly told her they could do nothing without video footage.
Then, in an incredible final indignity, they retaliated by charging her $9,000 for the training she had received and effectively fired her.
When you see this level of systemic abuse and exploitation, the confluence of debt, isolation, and lack of corporate accountability, you begin to understand why the workforce is so fragile, why 90% of new hires quit, and why the emotional weight Lorette is ministering to is so severe.
The system is designed to chew people up and spit them out.
And this whole cycle of economic and psychological oppression, it brings us right back to the cultural mythos Lorette is ministering to.
Right, the cowboy Pentecostalism culture that's observed in the chapel. It's more than just faith. It's a form of ritualized resistance against the forces trying to crush them.
That identity is everything. The image of the outlaw, the peripatetic dude, that is the trucker's life-giving faith. They believe they're the spiritual heirs to the cattle drivers, answering to the open road and no one else.
So the constant cameras, the AI, the e-logs, the debt peonage, it's threatening this innermost sense of self.
Yes. Even more profoundly than it threatens their ability to earn a wage.
Right.
It is a direct attack on their identity as free agents.
Yet, the reality of life on the road is far from romantic. It's a grinding existence defined by 2 stark extremes: mortal danger and wilting tedium.
Let's look at the danger first. Truckers are navigating 80,000-pound rigs in traffic, swarming with civilian drivers who often just don't understand the physics involved.
They need 3 football fields of distance to stop safely when they're fully loaded.
Right, and the sources include a chilling anecdote from an accident investigator on Reddit. A driver was cut off on a wet road, and though he tried everything, he just couldn't get the truck to stop.
And he watched aghast as he barreled into the car, killing the man instantly and leaving his wife a quadriplegic.
The psychological trauma of that kind of inevitability, knowing that despite your best efforts, physics is sometimes going to win, that's immense. It weighs heavily on these drivers.
Then there's the opposite extreme, the tedium, the waiting.
This is where the e-logs and the corporate inefficiency clash head on. Of the 11 allotted driving hours a trucker gets each day, they spend an average of 4.5 hours just idling at warehouses.
Just waiting to be loaded and unloaded. And this time is mandatory, non-productive, and largely unpaid.
And the inefficiency is infuriating precisely because they're so tightly monitored everywhere else. As one trucker bitterly observed, If they can tell me when I can eat and when I can take a nap with the e-log, how come they can't tell these people loading and unloading these trucks that they have a set amount of time to do it?
It's a great question. They're digitally chained and monitored for safety and corporate metrics, but their time is utterly disrespected where it impacts corporate logistics and warehouse profitability.
It highlights the deeply asymmetric value system at play. The driver's time is expendable, the corporation's liability is not.
And shadowing all this economic and regulatory pressure is the ultimate threat: automation.
The supply chain chaos unleashed by the pandemic fueled a massive rush of venture capital into autonomous trucking startups, $11 billion from 2019 through 2021 alone.
The optimism is palpable, especially in Washington. U.S. House members formed a bipartisan autonomous vehicle caucus convinced the technology is moving quickly.
And Dmitry Dolgov, the co-CEO of Waymo, publicly stated that AVs will help untangle supply chains and backfill the immense shortage of truck drivers.
So this rush to automation suggests that if the corporation is refusing to pay the human worker a living wage, the logical next step is simply to try to eliminate the human element altogether.
But the sources note that this confidence is everywhere haunted by doubt. The technical reality is far messier than the investment pitches suggest.
When you look closely at the reality, the timeline just keeps slipping.
It does. One leading startup, Too Simple, publicly executed its first entirely driverless run. But the definition of driverless was, let's say, heavily qualified.
It required a scouting-led vehicle, a trailing escort ready to intervene,
And law enforcement stalking it from half a mile behind. That is hardly autonomous operation in a free-flowing supply chain.
In fact, we're seeing major structural failures. Too Simple and Navistar abruptly severed their partnership despite having 7,000 orders for autonomous trucks scheduled for 2024 production.
And their rival, Aurora Innovation, has pushed its timeline back significantly, moving their expected launch from late 2023 to late 2024. The technology has hit an impasse that venture capital dollars can't seem to solve.
Anthony Lewandowski, who is a co-founder of Google's self-driving vehicle division, suggests the bottleneck is fundamental.
He says the truck's inability to understand the world and react to sudden spontaneous occurrences is the problem. It highlights the vast difference between solving a physics problem like highway driving and solving a complex human situational awareness problem.
Like reacting to a rogue mattress in the road or a sudden snow squall.
Exactly. Lewandowski wondered openly, is it 5 years or 50?
And beyond that, researchers stress that the trucker's job is more comprehensive than just steering. They perform essential non-driving duties that are less susceptible to automation.
Things like customer service, navigating last-mile delivery obstacles, loading and unloading assistance, vital safety checks. The job is an integrated role that the current iteration of AI simply cannot handle.
And this internal conflict, the desire to maintain the identity of the independent cowboy versus the existential threat of being replaced by a machine, it's perfectly embodied by Jason Childs.
Yeah, the 41-year-old trucker the author rides with. He's described as the Byronic anti-hero, the preacher minus the jail cell epiphany.
He clings desperately to the cowboy mythos, right down to insisting on driving a manual transmission because it gives me greater control and it saves lives every day.
He despises computerized driving, and he defensively dismisses the idea of obsolescence. You're never going to get rid of the real truck driver. He's fighting the machine physically and ideologically.
Yet moments later, this confidence just cracks.
It does. He acknowledges the deep folklore, all the country songs, the Smokey and the Bandit legacy, and then immediately concludes with this profound sense of fatalism. Automation will be the death of the cowboy.
He sees the motive so clearly, stripping away the supply chain optimization narrative.
And he just says, it's all about saving money. That's all it's about. The threat isn't intelligence, it's exploitation.
And that fatalistic realization, it leads us to the collective anger that has really boiled over in recent years. The sources briefly touch on the COVID aftermath as a key source of rage.
Because it provided this moment of fleeting respect that was then just so quickly withdrawn.
Right. Truckers felt like heroes during the pandemic shutdown. They were the essential lifeline, running 65 in rush hour Atlanta when the roads were apocalyptically empty.
They were lauded, they were thanked, they briefly felt respected by the public. Yet as soon as the danger passed, they rapidly reverted to being treated like, as one driver put it, poses.
Another driver added, "Boy, it sure was nice while it lasted."
And this feeling of being essential but individually disposable, it fueled the recent collective actions, like the convoys.
Those protests were less about any single mandate and more about a sustained outcry against big tech and overwhelming government regulation.
All fueled by that feeling of being oppressively monitored, where they yearned for liberty. They were fighting for the soul of the cowboy identity one last time.
The final sequence of the author's trip with Jason Childs and his stepson JD, it just illustrates the sheer, maddening absurdity of modern inefficiency and corporate indifference.
The system's ultimate indignity. Childs is hauling 38,000 pounds of cornmeal destined for a tortilla chip factory in LaBelle, Florida.
And the destination itself becomes a test of the non-automated human element. The factory is desolate, no signs, no instructions, and careless civilian cars are parked haphazardly everywhere.
Completely blocking the path to the loading dock. A machine could never handle this spontaneous, real-world obstacle.
So Childs now faces this high-stakes task that requires immense dexterity and concentration. He has to slalom his 80,000-pound mastodon backward 100 yards in the dark, maneuvering around the parked cars.
The author rightly calls this a double black diamond maneuver, a real testament to professional high-level skill.
And here is the crushing irony. After threading the needle perfectly for nearly 100 yards, the truck scrapes a low overhang, snapping the truck's antenna clean off near the end.
It's the ultimate minor indignity immediately following an act of high professional skill. It just symbolizes how even perfection is punished by the constraints of the job.
And the absurdity culminates at the second delivery in Plant City, near Tampa, where they're set to pick up a load of steel piping.
The rain is torrential, half diluvian, the source describes it, just pouring down in sheets. They pull up to the receiving gate and wait.
And they wait and wait. No one emerges from the factory.
Childs calls the foreman, who confirms the crew won't come out until it stops raining because simply they don't feel like getting wet.
Child's rage is palpable and completely justified. He doesn't hold back. He just boils over with professional contempt.
Because he's a tender-footed sack of shit. This is the cowboy railing against the bureaucratic softness that undermines his entire existence.
And you see the systemic failure perfectly encapsulated here. The e-logs are clocking them, demanding they stop, rest, adhere to rigid schedules, risking fines if they exceed their allotted time.
Yet the physical loading and unloading, the entire economic purpose of their trip, is subject to the whims and comfort level of an indifferent factory crew who refuse to step into the rain.
Hours pass, and a growing convoy of frustrated trucks stretches back to the street. Drivers are on the phone, calling the foreman, but nothing moves.
It is an existential waiting that summarizes the entire dilemma of the 21st century trucker.
Yeah.
Trapped, monitored, and utterly powerless against corporate indifference and inefficiency that actively erodes their ability to earn a living.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We rely on this knowledge, and we rely on these individuals. Every product you order, every item in the grocery store, every piece of technology you use, it passes through the cab of a truck.
And what stands out to me is the deep paradox that defines the life of the 21st century truckers. They are absolutely essential to the nation's supply chain, the gears that make the entire economy turn. Yet individually, they are entirely disposable to corporate interests, trapped between rigid digital surveillance, the e-logs and cameras, and endless, unproductive waiting at the warehouses.
The system is actively facilitating the replacement of the autonomous last cowboy with the compliant, zombified steering wheel holder.
Right. And recognizing the human cost, the debt peonage, the crushing loneliness, the physical toll, and the systemic humiliation behind that delivery is so crucial.
We've seen an industry caught in this cycle of self-sabotage, constantly creating and subsidizing the very turnover they decry, all while simultaneously trying to invent a machine to replace the humans they're currently abusing.
And here's where it gets really interesting, and a final thought for you to consider. The author leaves Jason Childs and JD waiting in that torrential, half-diluvian rain, poised behind a line of trucks aimed at a gate that remains shut.
So if the American supply chain depends entirely on the resilience and dedication of these individuals, their human spirit, their cowboy mythos, what happens when that spirit is finally crushed by the combined weight of corporate greed, digital chains, and endless profit-eroding inefficiency?
Is the ultimate threat to the global supply chain not automation, but the profound, simple indifference to the human beings who keep the wheels turning?
Think about that next time you see a massive rig rolling down the highway. What kind of prison is that driver currently inhabiting?